welcome back to the archives. Find your seat. Let the quiet of the room settle around you. We are going to dispense with the standard history books tonight. We are not here to recite the dates of battles or the lineage of kings that you can find in any library in Sharn. We are here to talk about a darker possibility, a theory that changes the very nature of life and death in Eberron. We are opening the file on the Warforged soul, but in this specific analysis, we refer to them as the echoes. Close your eyes and visualize the creation forge. In the canon history, you know, it is a miracle of arcane science credited to Aren and Merrick's Decaneth. It is a device that seemingly breathed new life into stone and wood. But let us look at the what if. The core concept of this timeline suggests a terrifying alternative. It posits that House Cannith did not create new souls from scratch. They ran out of time. They ran out of soldiers. And so, Aren Decaneth might have looked at the casualty lists and the graveyards and decided that death was merely an inefficiency. We know that in Eberron cosmology, the plane of Dollar is the realm of the dead. It is a place of apathy where memories fade before the soul eventually transitions or dissolves. But this theory asks, what if Dollar was treated not as a destination, but as a reservoir? Imagine the mechanics of the siphon. This speculative device would replace the heart of the creation forges, instead of channeling the elemental fire of Fernia. It would punch a microscopic hole through the veil of reality, reaching into the gray mists of Dollar, and dragging a fading soul back into the world of the living. In this scenario, the Warforged are not new beings. They are the recycled dead. I want you to focus on the sensation of the awakening through this lens. This is the primary horror of our theory. Imagine you are a farmer from the Eldin Reaches. You died of a fever in the year 850. You drifted into the peaceful gray fog of Dollar, ready to forget. Suddenly, there is a hook in your chest. You are ripped backward. The silence of death is replaced by the deafening roar of a blast furnace. You try to gasp for air, but you have no lungs. You try to scream, but the vocal matrix has not been installed yet. You are trapped in a heavy, cold, metal shell. Your vision is not your own. It is a heads-up display of magical sigils. You look down at your hands. They are not the hands that held a plow. They are 3 fingered claws made of darkwood and steel. This narrative recontextualizes every Warforged. They are not children searching for a purpose. They are ancient spirits trapped in a nightmare of industry. In this version of events, House Cannith called this process the harvest. It would have been industrial necromancy disguised as artifice. We can assume they would have set up listening posts to scan the afterlife for specific frequencies, searching for the souls of veterans, mercenaries, and killers who died centuries ago. They pulled them out, bound them to the metal, and then they would have needed a way to control them. This leads us to the concept of the dampeners. These would be magical wards etched into the Gulra, the rune on the Warforged forehead. Their job would be to suppress the memory of the life before, forcing the soul into a state of fugue, where only the muscle memory remains. They wanted the skill of the master swordsman, but they did not want his trauma. But as any scholar of magic knows, seals eventually leak. And this is where the what if becomes a story of personal horror. The Warforged in this timeline are plagued by what Cannith technicians might call glitches, but which we interpret as memories. A Warforged sentry stands guard in the rain. It does not need to sleep. It does not feel cold. But suddenly, it shivers. It is not a mechanical malfunction. It is the soul remembering a winter night 300 years ago. It is the memory of being flesh and blood. Consider the intake process. When a new batch of Warforged came off the line in Sire, they were not taught how to fight. They were simply handed weapons. The artificers would watch. Unit 7, the artificer might say, pick up the longbow. The Warforged picks it up. Its metal fingers adjust the grip instantly. It checks the tension of the string. It stances its feet perfectly. It has never seen a bow in its current life. But the soul inside was an archer in the Silver Crusade. If a soul showed an aptitude for baking, or farming, or poetry, it might have been considered a failed harvest, scrapped or sent to the front lines as fodder, because a poet does not help you win the last war. But sometimes, the memories would bleed through in the middle of combat. Imagine a Warforged soldier charging a trench in Canath. The adrenaline, or the magical equivalent of it, is pumping. The dampeners are stressed. Suddenly, the Warforged stops. It sees a face in the opposing trench. A young human soldier. The soul inside the Warforged screams, "That is my son." It is impossible, of course. The soul has been dead for centuries, but the soldier has the same eyes, the same fear. The Warforged lowers his weapon. He reaches out a hand. "Peter," he asks. His voice is a metallic grinding sound. The human soldier screams and thrusts a spear into the Warforged's chest. The Warforged dies, or rather, the body is destroyed, and the soul is ripped away again, sent back to the void. Confused, betrayed, heartbroken for the second time. This would explain why soldiers of the 5 nations often whispered that the Warforged were haunted. They noticed that the machines would sometimes hum old lullabies that no one had heard for generations, or carve intricate wooden toys during their sentry duty. House Cannith would have tried to wipe these behaviors, increasing the power of the dampeners, instituting the purge, a ritual of static noise to erase surfacing memories. But you cannot kill a ghost. You can only make it angry. And as the war dragged on, the souls would have begun to fight back against the metal, finding each other in the dark. This brings us to the speculative concept of the discordant. If the siphon grabbed 2 souls at once, 2 spirits holding onto each other in the afterlife, they would be stuffed into a single kyber shard. These Warforged would be erratic from the moment of activation. 2 voices fighting for control of one mouth. To the generals, these were broken equipment. But to us, They are the most tragic figures of the lore. As we move into the next section, we need to explore how this internal conflict manifested in their daily lives. We need to talk about the ghost habits. How does a being that does not eat deal with phantom hunger? How does a being that does not sleep deal with nightmares? The Warforged of this timeline are not stoic robots. They are traumatized survivors of a metaphysical kidnapping, and they are trying to remember who they were before the iron took them. Stay with me. The air is getting colder. That means we are getting closer to the truth. Let us move inward. We have looked at the factory. Now we must look at the prisoner. I want you to imagine the mind of a Warforged in this timeline. It is not a single room. It is a house divided. On the ground floor, you have the construct mind. This is the artificial intelligence built by House Cannith. It is cold. It is logical. It runs the diagnostics. It obeys orders. But upstairs, locked in the attic, is the echo. The echo is the soul. It is the confused spirit of the baker, the mother, the artist. It is trapped in the dark, watching the world through a window it cannot open. This section is about the friction between the floors. We call it the bleed. We know that House Cannith uses dragon shards to bind elemental energies, but binding a complex human soul is far more difficult. The memories are always leaking through the floorboards. The most common manifestation of this would be the phenomenon of phantom senses. A Warforged does not need to eat. It has no stomach. It processes alchemical fluids for fuel. Yet, in this scenario, many Warforged would report a sensation of phantom hunger, not a craving for energy, but a specific craving for flavors they can no longer taste. Picture a squad of Warforged standing guard near a campfire where human soldiers are cooking a stew. The Warforged will stand just downwind, inhaling the steam. The construct mind analyzes the smoke for toxins, but the echo in the attic remembers Sunday dinners. It remembers the warmth of a kitchen in Ondair. It remembers the feeling of fullness. The Warforged will reach out a hand, fingers twitching, almost mimicking the motion of holding a spoon. Then the programming kicks in. The hand drops. The moment is gone, but the sorrow remains. It goes deeper than hunger. It is about the sensation of the body itself. The echo expects to feel skin. It expects to feel the wind on its face. Instead, it feels the dull, numb weight of plating. This creates a condition we might call dysphoria of the iron. Many Warforged might spend hours rubbing their own arms, trying to find the nerve endings, trying to feel a scratch, but only feeling the vibration of the core. This duality affects their skills as well. This is where the concept of muscle memory takes on a literal meaning. House Cannith wanted the muscle memory of killing, and they got it. There are reports in the lore of Warforged fresh off the assembly line who pick up a sword and immediately fall into a high guard stance. A fencing style that fell out of fashion 200 years ago. The artificers cheer. Look at the programming, they say. But it is not programming. The The soul inside simply remembers how to hold the steel. It remembers the dance. But the tragedy is that the muscles remember other things too. Things that Kenneth did not want. Let us speculate on a case study. Unit 49, known to his squad as Fiddler. Fiddler was a standard infantry unit designed for the shield wall. But whenever Fiddler was at rest, he would tap his fingers on his shield. He was not tapping a random rhythm. He was tapping the finger positions of a complex concerto. If the soul inside Unit 49 was a musician, a violinist, or a cellist, then, when Fiddler held his sword, he did not grip it like a hammer. He held it delicately, with a loose wrist, the way one holds a bow during combat. This bleed-through would change his fighting style. He did not hack and slash. He flowed. He treated the battle like a tempo. Strike, rest, strike, rest. His squad mates thought it was a quirk of his manufacturing. They did not know that he was trying to turn the screams of the dying into a melody, because that was the only way his soul could process the violence. The tragedy of the duality is that the Warforged often do not know why they do these things. The dampeners are strong enough to erase the specific context. Fiddler did not remember the violin. He only remembered the itch in his fingers. He only felt that something was missing from his hands. But there is a darker side to this duality, the conflict of ethics. What happens when you put the soul of a pacifist into a war machine? This creates a condition known as the hesitation. Imagine a Warforged ordered to burn down a village in the borderlands. The construct mind receives the order. Target, village, action, incinerate, but the echo screams no. The echo remembers living in a village like this. It remembers the thatch roofs. For a split second, the Warforged freezes, the gears lock up, the magical current fluctuates, the commander yells. Fire, the construct mind overrides the echo. It forces the arm to move. It forces the trigger to pull. The village burns, and inside the machine, the soul weeps. It is trapped in the passenger seat of a vehicle that is committing murder. It is a prisoner of its own body. This internal torture would lead to the development of a secret language among the Warforged. They could not speak openly about their past lives, so they might use subvocal harmonics. Warforged vocal synthesizers can produce sounds below the range of human hearing. When two Warforged stood guard together, they would stand in silence to the human ear, but on the low frequency. They were sharing feelings. Sorrow, one would broadcast. Comfort, the other would reply. Cold, one would say. Endurance, the other would answer. It was a rudimentary language of empathy, a way to say, I know you are in there. I know you are not a machine. I see you. We must also consider the nightmares. Warforged do not sleep, but they do enter a low power state called the sentry trance. During this time, the sensory input is dialed down and the dampeners relax slightly. This is when the attic door opens. A Warforged in sentry trance might suddenly start speaking in a language it does not know. A language dead for 1,000 years. It might call out names: Sarah, Tavik, Mama. Soldiers sleeping near Warforged often reported hearing these midnight confessions. They thought the machines were haunted, and in this timeline, they were right, sometimes. The nightmare is physical. A Warforged might start digging a hole in the dirt while in a trance, digging frantically, as if trying to find something buried, or trying to bury something when it wakes up. It looks at the hole with no memory of digging it. The construct mind categorizes this as systems diagnostic error. But we infer the truth. The soul was trying to dig its own grave, or perhaps the grave of a loved one lost centuries ago. This psychological pressure cooker could not last forever. The duality is unstable. You cannot keep a human spirit in a box of iron and expect it to remain sane. As the war intensified, the cracks grew wider, but before the rebellion could fully form, the world broke. The pressure of holding millions of angry souls in iron boxes finally became too much for the fabric of reality to handle. This leads us to the most significant event in Eberron's history: the Mourning in our timeline. The Mourning was not a magical accident. It was a prison break. In the next section, we will walk into the mists. We will see what happens when the barrier between the living and the dead finally shatters. And we will meet the one man who remembers everything, the Lord of Blades. Take a breath. The silence in the room is heavy, but do not worry. We are just getting to the heart of the storm. Let us dim the lights further. In fact, let us extinguish the lamps entirely. We will sit by the glow of the embers alone. The shadows in the corners of the library are deep now. They stretch and twist like the mists we are about to discuss. We have arrived at the pivotal moment in the history of Eberron, the scar that defines the world, the Mourning. In the standard texts, the Mourning is a mystery, a magical catastrophe of unknown origin that destroyed the nation of Sire in a single day. Theories range from a weapon malfunction to the wrath of the sovereigns. But in our timeline, the timeline of the echoes, the cause is not a mystery. It is a mathematical certainty. It is the inevitable result of the industrial pressure we discussed earlier. The date is the 20th of Olarun. The year is 994. Let us transport ourselves to the manufacturing floor of the great foundry in Metral, the capital of Sire. The war is raging on all fronts, but here in the heart of the nation, it is business as usual. House Cannith was preparing for something massive. The records imply that the demand for Warforged had reached a critical peak. Sire needed an army, not just a battalion, but an entire generation of soldiers. Instantly, in our scenario, the leadership of House Cannith authorized the activation of the Omega Siphon. This speculative device was not designed to pull one soul at a time. It was designed to act as a dredge, to widen the aperture of the portal and scoop up thousands of spirits simultaneously. At noon on that fateful day, the switch was thrown. Imagine the sound. It started as a low hum, a vibration that rattled the teeth of everyone in the city. The siphon opened, but it did not open a small hole. It tore the fabric of reality. Because of the years of constant harvesting, the membrane between the material plane and the realm of the dead was already brittle. When the Omega siphon pulled, the fabric ripped. This was the soul quake. It was not an explosion of fire. It was an explosion of silence for a radius of hundreds of miles. The connection to Dollar collapsed. The gray mist of the underworld did not just leak in, it poured in. It rushed into the vacuum of Sire with the force of a tidal wave. This mist is not water vapor. It is the physical manifestation of entropy. It is the atmosphere of death. Now, consider what happens when a living human is exposed to the raw atmosphere of the afterlife. Their soul is not prepared for it. The connection between their body and their spirit is severed instantly. This explains the bodies found in the Mournland. They are not decayed, they are preserved. They look like statues. Why? Because their time was stopped. The entropy of Dollar washed over them and froze them in a single moment of terror. But here is the most important part of this theory, the part that ties it back to our Warforged. Why did the Warforged survive when the wave of gray mist hit the lines of Warforged soldiers? They did not die. They did not warp. They stood still. They survived because they were already dead. They were already anchored to the frequency of Dollar. Their bodies were built with Kyber dragon shards designed to hold a soul against the pressure of the void. When the soul quake hit, they acted like lightning rods. The energy passed through them. It washed over their plating and resonated with the crystals in their chests. For the human population, it was the end of the world. For the Warforged, it was a moment of absolute clarity. Remember the dampeners, the magical wards used to suppress the memories. The surge of necromantic energy from the soul quake would have fried the dampeners. All of them, instantly, in a single second. Every Warforged within the borders of Sire woke up. The artificial programming was wiped away. The construct mind was overloaded, and the echo took full control. Imagine the scene in the trenches. 1,000 Warforged stand amidst the rolling gray fog. The humans around them are turning to glass. The screams are silenced. The world turns gray, and Unit 7-4, who has been a mindless soldier for 5 years, suddenly drops his sword. He looks at his hands, and he remembers his name is Thomas. He remembers he was a carpenter. He looks up at the sky, which is now a wall of swirling dead gray mist, and he feels a strange sense of peace. Because the mist feels like home. This is the terrible secret of the Mournland in this timeline. It is not a toxic wasteland to the Warforged. It is a terraformed environment. It has been converted into an outpost of Dollar. The Warforged are the native species of this new land. Those who entered the Mournland after the events speak of the Whispers. Explorers claim that if you sleep in the mists, you hear voices. These are the voices of the displaced souls. And who are their wardens, the Warforged, in the days following the Mourning? The Warforged did not leave. The borders were sealed, but the Warforged stayed in the mist. Why? Because out there, in the clear air of the 5 nations, they are monsters, they are machines, but in the Mournland, in the gray fog, they are alive. The heavy atmosphere suppresses the pain of their existence. It soothes the itch of the duality. The Mournland became a sanctuary, and leading them is a figure who understands the nature of this wound better than anyone else. Let us cross the border now. We are walking deep into the glass plateau. The geography here is wrong. The horizon curves at an impossible angle. We are approaching the fortress of the Lord of Blades. In the stories told in taverns, he is a mad warlord who wants to kill all flesh and blood creatures. But in our timeline, he is not a conqueror. He is a curator. There is a prevailing theory among scholars of this timeline that the Lord of Blades is actually Aaron Decaneth. Aaron was the genius who perfected the Warforged. He was the one who found the rituals to harvest the souls. The theory goes that on the day of mourning, when the siphon cracked the world, Aaron was in the control room. He knew his human body would not survive, so he did the only thing he could. He jumped into the prototype chassis of a Warforged Titan. He activated the binding runes manually. He used his own soul as the fuel. He tore his spirit from his dying flesh and anchored it into the iron. He survived, but at a terrible cost. He is now a human soul trapped in a monster's body. And because he was the creator, he remembers everything. He knows exactly where every soul in every Warforged came from. His crusade is not one of hate, it is one of penance. He calls himself the Lord of Blades because he lives on the knife edge of guilt. Look closely at his armor. It is covered in blades, but they are not serrated for tearing flesh. They are smooth, polished. They are arranged in specific geometric patterns. In this lore, those blades are tuning forks. The Lord of Blades uses the metal spines on his armor to resonate with the frequencies of the souls around him. He is a living antenna. He amplifies the comfort of the group and cancels out the noise of the outside world. He acts as the anchor, the dam holding back the ocean of death. If the 5 nations were to succeed in assassinating the Lord of Blades, they think they would be removing a threat. In reality, they would be breaking the seal, without his will holding it back. The Mournland would expand. It would consume the entire continent. He is the only thing standing between Corvair and total extinction, and he knows it. I am the wall, he whispers to the empty air. I am the gate. I am the end. This recontextualization changes everything. The Warforged in the Mournland are not an army of invasion. They are an army of containment. They are guarding the hole in the world to keep the rest of us safe. But outside the mist, in the cities of the living, the echoes who were not lucky enough to be in Sire are facing a different kind of crisis. They are waking up in a world that does not understand what they are. This brings us to the next chapter, the crisis of return. What happens when a machine walks into a bank and claims to be the owner of the account? We are leaving the silence of the Mournland now. We are heading to the courtrooms of Thronehold, where the battle for the soul is fought with paper and ink. Please come in. Close the heavy oak door behind you. The sound of the latch clicking into place is satisfying, is it not? It shuts out the world. We have left the misty graveyards and the smoky battlefields. We are now in a room that smells of dry dust and expensive wax. This is the Hall of Records. The floor is black marble. The walls are lined with filing cabinets that stretch up into the darkness of the vaulted ceiling. We are going to talk about the law. In the standard history of Eberron, the Treaty of Thronehold is celebrated as the document that ended the last war in the year 996. It is the piece of paper that recognized the Warforged as a new species. It gave them personhood. It gave them freedom. But in the timeline of the echoes, the Treaty of Thronehold was not a declaration of human rights. It was a panic maneuver. It was a desperate attempt by the ruling families of the Five Nations to stop a legal apocalypse. You see, the problem with the echoes is not just that they have memories. The problem is that they have names, and in the feudal system of Corvair, a name is worth land, a name is worth gold, a name is worth a crown. Let us examine the crisis of the year 996. The war was winding down. The Warforged were waking up, and then a specific incident occurred in the Brelish capital of Rote. A Warforged command unit, designated Aegis, walked into the grand estate of the Urklarn family, one of the wealthiest noble families in the nation. Aegis did not attack the guards. He walked past them. He knew the shift change schedule because he had set it up 40 years ago. He walked into the study of the current patriarch, Lord Urklarn. Aegis sat down in the patriarch's chair. He pointed to a hidden safe behind a painting of a griffin. He recited the combination: right 3, left 7, right 1. Inside the safe were the deeds to the estate, the titles to the iron mines in the north, and the family seal. Aegis looked at the terrified lord and said, "I am your grandfather, Lord Heston Urklarn. I died of the pox in 950, but I am back, and I am disappointed in how you are managing my money." This was the spark that almost burned down the legal system of Galifar. If a Warforged could prove they were a specific deceased citizen, did they have the right to reclaim their property? Under the old laws of Galifar, inheritance passes upon death. But if the death is proven to be temporary, or if the soul is proven to be extant, the transfer of property is null and void. Suddenly, every noble family in Corvair was looking at their Warforged servants with terror. Was the butler actually the uncle who went missing? Was the bodyguard actually the true heir to the duchy? The banks of House Kundarak would have been in chaos. Warforged walking up to tellers and giving account passwords from centuries ago, demanding access to vaults that had been sealed for generations. The economy was on the brink of collapse. If the Warforged were allowed to reclaim their past assets, they would instantly become the wealthiest faction on the continent. So, the Treaty of Thronehold was convened. The representatives of the nations met on the island city of Thronehold, but the most important negotiations did not happen in the main hall. They happened in the back rooms, between the lawyers of House Civis and the artificers of House Cannith. They had to craft a legal definition that granted the Warforged freedom, but stripped them of their past. This brings us to the speculative Article 31, also known as the Tabula Rasa Clause. The clause states, for the purposes of the law, a Warforged is designated as a singular, unique entity, born at the moment of the first activation of its core. Any memories, personality traits, or knowledge possessing a resemblance to prior living persons are legally classified as magical echoes and do not constitute a continuation of legal identity. It was a masterful piece of legal fiction. They admitted the memories were real, but they legislated that they did not matter. They told the Warforged, you are free, but you are new. You cannot be the Duke. You can only be the machine. However, enforcing this was a nightmare. This led to the creation of the identity courts. For 10 years following the war, specialized tribunals were set up in major cities. If a Warforged claimed a past identity, they were dragged before the court. Imagine the scene. A Warforged stands in the dock. I am Alistair, the Warforged says. I own the bakery on Menthai's plateau. The Civis lawyer adjusts his spectacles. Do you have the deed? No, the Warforged says. I have the memories. I know the recipe for the bread. I know the crack in the oven wall. Hearsay, the lawyer says, stamping a document. The bakery belongs to your grandson. You are merely a construct suffering from necrotic bleed. Case dismissed. It was a systematic erasure of history, but while the courts rejected them, the temples were torn apart by them. The religious fallout was just as volatile as the legal one. Consider the Church of the Silver Flame in Thrain. They are dedicated to fighting supernatural evil. One faction, the Puritans, argued that Warforged were abominations, necromantic prisons that violated the cycle of souls. They wanted to destroy them, to free the spirits inside. But another faction saw them as miracles. If a Warforged channeled the power of the silver flame and spoke with the voice of a dead saint, was that not a sign? Warforged in Thrain are often worshipped or hunted, depending on which church they walk into. And in Canath, the blood of Vol cultists do not hate the Warforged. They envy them. The seekers of the divinity within believe that death is the ultimate failure. When they look at a Warforged, they see a being that has cheated death, a being that is immortal. There is a black market in Canath where rich cultists try to buy Warforged bodies. They want to upload themselves. They want to become the echoes. This legal and spiritual rejection led to a mass displacement. Most Warforged did not want to be dukes or saints. They just wanted to go home. There are thousands of heartbreaking reports in the archives. A Warforged walking back to a farm in the Eldine Reaches. It stands at the fence, watching an old woman hang laundry. The Warforged knows her. It was her husband. It remembers the day they built the fence. It wants to open the gate. It wants to say, "I am back." But it looks at its metal hands. It feels the cold iron of its face. It knows the Article 31 forbids it from claiming the life. But more than that, it knows it would terrify her. So the Warforged stands there for an hour, watching, and then it turns around and walks away. They become drifters, the wandering legion. They congregate in the slums, in districts like High Walls and Sharn. They form their own communities, but they are communities built on secrets. In the taverns of High Walls, you will see Warforged sitting at tables, playing cards. If you listen closely, you will realize they are not using their unit names. Your turn, Miller. I raise you, Smith. Fold, Baron. They call each other by the titles they held in the life before. It is a small rebellion, a way to keep the truth alive in the dark. And this rebellion is growing. A movement is rising called the Rights of Return. They are challenging Article 31, and they have a terrifying weapon: blackmail. The Warforged remember where the bodies are buried. Literally. They remember the illicit affairs of the nobles. They remember the locations of stolen gold. They remember the crimes of the very people who wrote the treaty. The kings of Corvair are sleeping uneasily because they know that their secrets are not safe in the grave anymore. The grave has walked out of the cemetery, and it is demanding payment. As we close this file on the legalities, we must look to the horizon. The status quo cannot hold. The dampeners are failing. The memories are getting stronger, and the Lord of Blades is getting tired. What happens when the dam breaks? What is the ultimate fate of a world where the past refuses to stay dead? In the final section, we will explore the future of the echoes. We will look at the 3 paths forward, and we will say our final goodbyes to the ghosts in the iron. Gather your papers. The clerk is watching us. It is time to leave the Hall of Records before they realize who we really are. We have reached the end of the file. The fire in the hearth has burned down to a pile of soft white ash. The room is cold now. The shadows have swallowed the corners of the library. It is fitting, because the future we are about to discuss is a thing of shadows. It is undefined, it is dangerous, and it is waiting just outside the door. We have explored the speculative origin of the echoes. We have walked the factory floors of the harvest. We have stood in the gray mists of the Mournland, and we have sat in the courtrooms of Thronehold. Now, we must ask the final question, the question that keeps the kings and queens of Corvair awake at night. What happens next? In this timeline, the status quo is unsustainable. The balance of power is shifting. We are standing on the precipice of a new age. Let us explore the 3 most likely paths for the future of Eberron in this reality. These are not wild guesses. These are projections based on the current magical and political trajectories we have discussed. The first scenario is known as the Great Unmasking. We know that, in this theory, the dampeners are failing. the magical wards designed by House Cannith to suppress the memories of the souls are degrading. Entropy is a constant force, and the energy of the souls is stronger than the containment fields. In this scenario, we project a cascading failure event. Imagine a single day, perhaps 10 years from now, when the dampeners finally burn out completely. It would happen simultaneously across the continent. Every Warforged in every city, every household, every army would suddenly wake up. The construct mind would dissolve. The echo would take full control. In an instant, the labor force of Corvair would vanish. The silent servants carrying crates on the docks would stop. They would drop their loads. They would look around with the eyes of ancient citizens. This would be the end of the Warforged as a class of people and the rebirth of the ancients. The psychological impact on the nations would be catastrophic. Imagine the panic in the streets of Sharn when the city watch suddenly remembers that they used to be the criminals of the lower wards. This scenario leads to the Republic of Memory. The Warforged, possessing the skills and knowledge of centuries past, would likely segregate themselves. They would form a new society, not based on land, but based on time. They would look at the current rulers of the 5 nations as children. "You have ruled for 20 years, a Warforged might say to King Borinal. "I ruled a kingdom in the age of monsters for 200 years. Step aside, boy." We would see the rise of a gerontocracy of iron, a government ruled by the oldest souls, the living humans, elves, and dwarves would become second-class citizens. They would be viewed as the unfinished, creatures who lack the perspective of death. It would be a benevolent tyranny. The Warforged would try to save the living from making the same mistakes they made in the past, but they would do it by taking away their freedom to choose. The second scenario is darker. We call it the second Mourning. We discussed earlier that the Lord of Blades acts as a living dam. He is holding back the expansion of the Mournland with his own will and his own soul. But Arin Decannith is only human, or at least, his soul is human, and humans get tired. What happens when the Lord of Blades finally breaks? What happens when the grief becomes too heavy to carry? If the containment field fails, the mists of Dollar will not just leak out, they will rush out. The Mournland would expand exponentially. It would consume Dargun in a week, Vaelnar in a month, and eventually, it would swallow Breland and Canath. But in this scenario, it is not an apocalypse of destruction. It is an apocalypse of conversion as the mist expands. It does not kill everyone. It transforms the world into a massive copy of the Mournland. The Warforged would be the only ones unaffected. In fact, they would be strengthened. The Fleshborn would be forced to adapt. We might see House Cannith frantically trying to build Warforged bodies for everyone. Imagine a panic where rich nobles are paying millions of gold pieces to be harvested, to be voluntarily killed and put into a machine before the mist takes them. This creates a world where biology is abandoned, a world of pure metal and magic. Eberron would become a dead world in the traditional sense. No crops, no breath, no blood, but it would be teeming with consciousness. It would be a planet of ghosts, driving suits of armor. This fulfills a dark interpretation of the draconic prophecy. There is a line in the prophecy that reads, "When the children of stone inherit the earth, the cycle of life shall be a circle of iron." The third scenario is the most hopeful, but also the most strange. We call it the synthesis. This scenario revolves around a cult called the Warforged. They believe that since they are constructed, they can be reconstructed. They can be improved deep in the cogs of Sharn. They are building a massive body, hundreds of feet tall. They believe that if they can upload enough of their experiences into this massive vessel, it will wake up. If the becoming God actually wakes up, it would be a being of unimaginable power. It would have the wisdom of 1,000,000 lives. This entity could act as a bridge. It could stabilize the connection between Eberron and Dollar. It could heal the wound of the mourning knot by closing it, but by filtering it. In this future, the Warforged find a way to reproduce, not by building new bodies, but by splitting their spark. We have seen hints of this in the creation of the docents. Warforged artificers might learn how to take a shard of their own soul, a piece of their own memory, and plant it in a new chassis. "I give you my love of music," a father might say to his new creation. "That is your seed, grow it." This would create a new form of life, one that is not stolen from the dead, but grown from the experience of the living. It would end the harvest. House Cannith's forges would be shut down, and the Warforged would become a self-sustaining species. They would become the elders. Every village would have a Warforged elder, a being who remembers the history of the town for 300 years. They would be the teachers, the record keepers, the guardians. Death would no longer be a terrifying end. It would be a transition. However, even in this hopeful future, there is a lingering sadness, because the echoes can never truly go back. The farmer who woke up in a soldier's body will never taste an apple again. The mother will never feel the warmth of a child's skin. They are immortal, yes, but they are numb. This is the price of the what if. In our standard Dungeons and Dragons games, we often treat resurrection as a mechanic. A diamond worth 5,000 gold pieces and a spell slot. But this lore reminds us that coming back is not the same as never leaving. The Warforged are a testament to the fact that some doors should stay closed, that the separation between the living and the dead exists for a reason. House Cannith tried to play God. They tried to turn the afterlife into a resource, like coal or iron, and in doing so, they broke the heart of the world. As we close the book on the Warforged soul, I want you to carry this perspective with you the next time you see a Warforged in your game, or the next time you play one. Do not think of them as a robot. Do not think of them as a generic soldier. Look at the Gulra on their forehead, that glowing rune, and imagine it is a keyhole. Inside that heavy plating beats a spirit that is confused, tired, and infinitely old. They are not the children of the future. They are the refugees of the past. They are the echoes in the iron, and they are waiting for the day when they can finally, truly, sleep. I am going to extinguish the last candle now. The library is closing. The dark is comfortable, is it not? It is just another kind of silence. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the hidden history of Eberron. If you enjoyed this exploration of the lore, if you enjoy peeling back the layers of the game, we love to find the tragedy and the beauty underneath, then please consider joining our circle of scholars. Click the like button to leave your mark on the archives. It helps other seekers find this knowledge. And subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you do not miss the next time we open the forbidden files. We have many more stories to tell. Stories of the Lords of Dust, stories of the dreaming dark, and stories of the things that swim in the sea of fallen stars. But for now, rest well, and remember, even in the deepest iron, there is a heartbeat. Good night.